Story of King Arthur and his Knights. By Howard Pyle. Legend has never produced a more romantic hero than King Arthur of Britain. Tales of his life were sung and narrated in medieval days long before they were written down. And over the intervening centuries, many poets and writers have told and retold the tales in their own special words. Not only do we learn from them about Arthur, who unified Britain, defeated her enemies, and became her king sometime in the 6th century, but also about Arthur's court and his Knights of the Round Table. Sir Launcelot, mighty in battles and in jousting. Queen Guinevere, the most beautiful lady in Christendom. Chivalrous Sir Gawain. Churlish Sir Kay. Merlin, the court magician. Sir Galahad, Launcelot's noble son, who sought the Holy Grail. And Elaine, the lily maid of Astolat. All are part of Arthurian lore. No one in this century has told the story of King Arthur more eloquently than Howard Pyle. The present selection, condensed from the 4 volumes of the original, brings to life all of Arthur's major adventures, and a splendid pageantry and color that fill these pages have the stylized beauty of an immense medieval tapestry. Howard Pyle, who also wrote The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, was known equally well as an illustrator. He taught both at the Drexel Institute in Philadelphia and at his own art school in Wilmington, and the vigor of his style had influenced a whole generation of illustrators by the time of his death in 1911. I shall now begin the story. Part 1, Arthur and Guinevere. Chapter 1, The Sword and the Anvil. In ancient days, there lived a very noble king named Uther Pendragon, and he became overlord of all Britain. This king was greatly aided into the achievement of the Pendragonship of the realm by the help of 2 men. Though one of these men was a certain very powerful enchanter and prophet, known as Merlin the Wise, and he gave very good counsel unto Uther Pendragon. The other man was a renowned knight, hight Ulfius, and he gave Uther Pendragon aid and advice in battle. So Uther Pendragon was able to overcome all of his enemies and to become king of the entire realm. After Uther Pendragon had ruled his kingdom for a number of years, he took to wife a certain beautiful lady, hight Igraine. This noble dame was the widow of the Duke Gerloy, by which prince she had had 2 daughters, one of whom was named Margase, and the other Morgana le Fay. And Morgana le Fay was a famous sorceress. These daughters the queen brought with her to the court of Uther Pendragon, and there Margase was wedded to King Urien of Gore, and Morgana le Fay was wedded to King Lot of Orkney. Now, after a while, Uther Pendragon and Queen Igraine had a son born unto them, and he was very beautiful, and of great size and strength of bone. And whilst the child still lay wrapped in his swaddling clothes, Merlin came to Uther Pendragon with a spirit of prophecy strong upon him. And he said, Lord, it is given unto me to foresee that shortly thou shalt die of a fever. Now should such a dolorous thing befall, this child, who is certes the hope of this realm, will be in great danger of his life, For many enemies shall rise up to seize his inheritance, and either he will be slain, or else he will be held in captivity, from which he shall hardly hope to escape. Wherefore I beseech thee, that thou wilt permit Sir Ulfius and myself to convey him away to some secret place, where he may be hidden until he groweth to manhood. When Merlin had made an end of speaking thus, Uther Pendragon made reply. Merlin, certes, if thy prophecy be true, then indeed this child should be conveyed hence to some safe place. Wherefore, I pray thee, perform thy will. Merlin did as he had advised, and he and Sir Ulfius conveyed the child away by night. And shortly afterward, Uther Pendragon was seized with sickness and died, exactly as Merlin had foretold. Then all the realm fell into great disorder, for each lesser king contended against his fellow for overlordship, and wicked knights and barons harried the highways, and levied toll upon helpless wayfarers. Thus there passed nearly 18 years in great affliction, and then one day the Archbishop of Canterbury summoned Merlin to him, and bespake him. Merlin, men say that thou art the wisest man in the world. Canst thou not find some means to heal the distractions of this woeful realm? Canst thou not choose a king who shall be a fit overlord for us, so that we may enjoy happiness as we did in the days of Uther Pendragon? Then Merlin lifted up his countenance upon the Archbishop, and he said, My lord, I do perceive that this country is soon to have a king, who shall be wiser and greater and more worthy of praise than was even Uther Pendragon. And he shall bring order and peace, and moreover, this king shall be of Uther Pendragon's own full blood royal. To this the Archbishop said, What thou tellest me, Merlin, is a wonderfully strange thing. But many lesser kings would fain be overlord of this land. How then shall we know the real king from those who proclaim themselves to be rightful king? My lord Archbishop, quoth Merlin, if I have thy leave to exert my magic, I shall set an adventure, which if any man achieve it, all the world shall know that he is the rightful king. And to this the Archbishop said, Merlin, I bid thee do so. So Merlin caused by magic that a huge marble stone, 4 square, should appear in an open place before the greatest church of London. And upon this block of marble there stood an anvil, and into the anvil there was thrust a great sword, midway deep of the blade. And this sword was the most beautiful that any man had ever seen, for the blade was of blue steel, and extraordinarily bright, and the hilt was of gold, inlaid with a great number of precious stones. And about the sword were written these words in letters of gold: Whoso pulleth out the sword from the anvil, that same is right wise king born of England. Then Merlin bade the Archbishop call together all the chief people of that land upon Christmas-tide, and he bade him command that every man should make essay to draw the sword out of the anvil, for that he who should succeed should be right wise King of Britain. Thus the mandate of the Lord Archbishop went forth, summoning people to the assay, and as Christmas-tide drew nigh, it appeared as though the entire world was wending its way to London town. The highways and byways became filled with kings and lords and knights and ladies and esquires and pages and men-at-arms. Every inn and castle was full of travelers, and everywhere there were tents and pavilions pitched for the accommodation of those who could not find shelter within doors. Now, among those who came unto London town, there was a certain knight very honourable, by name Sir Ector of Bonmaison. This knight had with him 2 sons, and the elder of these was Sir Kay, a young knight of great valour and promise. And the younger was a lad of 18 years of age, by name Arthur. Sir Ector had also with him a great number of retainers and esquires and pages. And when he had come to London town, he went to a meadow where many other noble knights had already established themselves. And there he set up a fair pavilion of green silk, and erected his banner emblazoned with the device of his house, to wit, a griffin, black, upon a field of green. And upon this meadow were a multitude of pavilions of many colours, and above each was the pennant and the banner of that lord to whom the pavilion belonged. Wherefore the sky was at places well nigh hidden with the gaudy colours of the fluttering flags, and well nigh hidden with the gaudy colours of the fluttering flags, I just repeated myself. And by now there were in London no less than 12 kings and 7 dukes, so that, what with their courts of lords and ladies and esquires and pages in attendance, the town of London had never seen the like before. Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury, having in mind the extraordinary state of the occasion that had brought together so many kings and dukes and lords, had commanded that there be a noble tournament proclaimed. Likewise, he commanded that this contest at arms should be held in a certain field nigh to the great church, 3 days before assay should be made of the sword and the anvil. To this tournament were bidden all knights who were of sufficient birth and quality for to fit them to take part therein. Accordingly, so many exalted knights made application for admission that the 3 heralds were kept busy looking into their pretensions unto the right of battle. For these heralds examined the escutcheons and the rolls of lineage of all applicants with great care. Now, Sir Kay went to that congress of heralds and submitted his pretensions unto them. And after they had examined into his claims to knighthood, they entered his name as a knight contestant. Sir Kay then chose his young brother Arthur for to be his esquire at arms on the field of battle. And Arthur was exceedingly glad because of the honour that had befallen him. Now, the day having arrived when this tourney was to be held, not less than 20,000 lords and ladies assembled at the field of battle, so that it appeared as though a solid wall of human souls surrounded that meadow. And in the centre of this wonderful court there was erected the throne of the Lord Archbishop. Above the throne was a canopy of purple cloth, emblazoned with silver lilies, and under this the Lord Archbishop sat in great estate. Now, when all that great assembly were in their places, a herald stood forth before the throne of the Archbishop, and blew a very strong blast upon a trumpet. At that signal, the turnpikes of the lists were opened, and 2 parties of knights contestant entered therein, the one party at the northern extremity of the meadow, and the other party in the southern extremity thereof. Then all that field was a glitter with polished armour, as each of the 2 parties took up its station. Then the herald blew upon the trumpet a second time, and each of those parties of knights quitted its station, and rushed forth against the other. This they did with such noise and fury, that the earth groaned beneath the feet of the war horses. And when the 2 companies met in the midst of the field, the roar of breaking lances was so terrible that those who heard it were appalled. Several fair dames swooned away with terror, and others shrieked aloud, for not only was there great uproar, but the air was filled with splinters of ash wood that flew about. In that famous assault, 60 honorable knights were overthrown. Wherefore, when the two companies withdrew, each to its station, the ground was covered all over with broken fragments of lances and of armor, and many knights were woefully lying in the midst of that wreck. To these ran divers esquires and pages, and lifted up the fallen men, and bare them away. And attendants ran and gathered up all the broken armor and the spears, and bare them away, so that the field was cleared once more. Then all those who gazed upon that meadow gave loud acclaim, for such a glorious contest at arms in friendly assay had hardly ever been beheld in that realm before. Now in this assault Sir Kay had conducted himself with such credit that no knight who was there had done better than he. For, though two opponents at once had directed their spears against him, yet he had successfully resisted their assault. And one of these two he smote so violently that he lifted that assailant entirely over the crupper of the horse which he rode. So Sir Kay was wonderfully well satisfied and pleased at heart. Now the two parties in array returned each to his assigned station, and when they had come there, each knight delivered up his spear into his esquire. For the next assault was to be undertaken with swords. Accordingly, when the herald again blew upon his trumpet, there was a great splendor of blades, all flashing in the air at once. And when the herald blew a second time, each party pushed forward the contest. In this affair, likewise, Sir Kay proved himself to be an extraordinary champion, for he violently smote down 5 knights, the one after the other, ere he was stayed in his advance. But when he struck a 6th knight, his sword blade snapped short at the haft, with the fierceness of the blow. In this pass it would have gone very ill with Sir Kay, but the 3 of his companions in arms thrust in betwixt him and his opponent. Thus Sir Kay was able to escape to the barriers. Now, when he reached the barrier, his esquire, young Arthur, came running to him. Sir Kay cried out, "Ho, brother, give me another sword from our father's pavilion." And Arthur said, "I will do so." And thereupon he leaped over the barrier and ran to his father's pavilion. But when he came to the pavilion, he found no one there, for all the attendants were at the tournament. Neither could he find any sword, wherefore he was put to a great pass to know what to do. In this extremity he bethought him of that sword that stood thrust into the anvil before the church. Whereupon he ran thither with all speed. And when he had come there, he discovered that no one was upon guard at the block of marble, for all were at the contest of arms. So young Arthur leapt upon the block of marble, and laid his hands upon the hilt of the sword. And he bent his army, and drew upon the sword, and lo! It came forth from the anvil with wonderful smoothness. And he wrapped the sword in his cloak, so that no one might see it, for it shone with exceeding brightness, and he hastened unto Sir Kay. Now when Sir Kay beheld the sword, he immediately knew it, and he wist not what to think. Then in a while he said, in a very strange voice, "Where got he that sword?" And Arthur beheld that his brother's countenance was greatly disturbed. And he said, "Brother, I could find no sword in our father's pavilion, wherefore I bethought me of that sword which stood in the anvil before the church. So I went thither and drew it forth." Then Sir Kay communed with himself thus, "Lo, my brother is hardly more than a child, and he is exceedingly innocent. Therefore he knoweth not what he hath done, nor what the doing thereof signifieth. Now, since he hath achieved this weapon, why should I not lay a claim to that achievement?" Whereupon he said to Arthur, "Give the sword and the cloak to me." And when Arthur had done so, Sir Kay said, "Tell no man of this, but go to our father where he sits at the lists, and bid him come straightway unto our pavilion. Chapter 2. Young Arthur's Birthright. Arthur did as Sir Kay commanded him, greatly possessed with the wonder that his brother should be so disturbed in spirit. For he wist not what he had done in drawing that sword from the anvil. For so it is in this world that a man sometimes proves himself to be worthy of great trust, and yet in lowliness of spirit he is unaware that he is worthy thereof. And so it was with young Arthur. So he made haste to that part of the lists where his father, Sir Ector, sat. And he said, Sire, my brother Kay hath sent me to bid thee come straightway unto our pavilion. Then Sir Ector arose and went with Arthur to the pavilion. And there, behold, Sir Kay was standing in the pavilion, and his face was as white as ashes, and his eyes shone with a wonderful brightness. And Sir Kay said to Sir Ector, Sire, here is a very wonderful matter. Therewith he took his father by the hand, and brought him to a table. And lo, there lay the sword of the anvil. Sir Ector immediately knew that sword, wherefore he was filled with astonishment, and he cried out, How came you by that sword? And Sir Kay said, Sire, I brake my sword in battle, whereupon I found me this sword in its stead. Then Sir Ector was altogether bemazed. But after a while he said, If so be that thou didst draw forth this sword from the anvil, then it must be that thou art rightwise King of Britain. But if thou didst indeed draw it forth from the anvil, then thou shalt as easily be able to thrust it back in again. At this Sir Kay was troubled in spirit, and cried out, Who could perform so great a miracle as to thrust a sword into solid iron? Whereunto Sir Ector made reply, Such a miracle is no greater than that thou hast performed in drawing it out. Then Sir Kay took comfort to himself, saying, My young brother Arthur was able to perform this miracle. Why should I not be able to do a miracle of a like sort? So he wrapped the sword in the cloak again, and he and Sir Ector and Arthur betook their way unto the marble stone and anvil. And Sir Kay mounted upon the cube of marble, and beheld the face of the anvil. And lo, it was without a scratch or scar of any sort. And Sir Kay said to himself, What man is there in life who could thrust a sword blade into a solid anvil of iron? Nevertheless, he set the point of the blade in the iron, and bore upon it with all his strength. But yet he did not pierce the iron, even to the breadth of a hair. So he at last came down, and he said to his father, Sire, no man in life may perform that miracle. Unto this Sir Ector made reply, How is it possible then that thou couldst have drawn out that sword as thou sayest? Then young Arthur lifted up his voice and said, My father, have I thy leave to speak? And Sir Ector said, Speak, my son. And Arthur said, I would that I might essay to handle that sword. Whereunto Sir Ector replied, By what authority wouldst thou handle that sword? And Arthur said, Because it was I who drew that sword forth from the anvil for my brother. Then Sir Ector gazed upon young Arthur in such a strange manner that Arthur cried out, Sire, why dost thou gaze so upon me? Hast thou anger against me? Whereunto Sir Ector made reply, In the sight of God, my son, I have no anger against thee. If thou hast a desire to handle the sword, thou mayest assuredly do so. So Arthur took the sword from Kay, and he leaped upon the marble stone, and he set the point of the sword upon the anvil, and bore upon it. And lo, the sword penetrated smoothly into the center of the anvil, and there it stood fast. And after that he drew the sword forth swiftly and easily, and then thrust it back again. Then Sir Ector cried out, Lord, Lord, what is the miracle mine eyes behold? And when Arthur came down from the cube of marble, Sir Ector kneeled down before him. But when Arthur beheld what his father did, he cried like one in pain, My father, why dost thou kneel to me? To him Sir Ector made reply, I am not thy father, and now it is made manifest that the blood of kings flows in thy veins. Then Arthur fell a-weeping, and he cried out, Father, what is this thou sayest? I beseech thee to arise. So Sir Ector arose and stood before Arthur, and he said, Arthur, why dost thou weep? And Arthur said, Because I am afraid. Then Sir Ector spake, saying, Arthur, I trow the time hath come for thee to know the true circumstances of thy life. Now, I do confess everything to thee in this wise, that 18 years ago there came to me the enchanter Merlin. And Merlin showed me the signet ring of Uther Pendragon, and he commanded me by the signet ring that I should be at the postern gate of Uther Pendragon's castle at midnight of that very day. So I went to the postern gate at midnight, and there came unto me Merlin and Sir Ulfius, who was the chief knight of Uther Pendragon's household. And Merlin bare in his arms a child, not long born, and wrapped in swaddling clothes. And I saw the child in the light of a lantern, which Sir Ulfius bare. He was very fair of face and large of bone. And thou wert that child. Then Merlin commanded me to take that child and rear him as mine own. And he said that the child was to be called Arthur. And he said that no one was to know otherwise than that the child was mine own. And I told Merlin that I would do as he would have me. And that lady, who was my wife, took that secret with her unto paradise when she died. And since then until now, no one in all the world knew aught of this matter, but I and those two aforementioned worthies. Nor have I until now known who was thy father, but now I do suspect that thy father was Uther Pendragon himself. For who but his son could have drawn forth that sword from the anvil? Then Arthur cried out, Woe! Woe! And Sir Ector said, Arthur, why art thou woeful? And Arthur said, Because I have lost my father, for I would rather have my father than be a king. Now there came unto that place two men, very tall and of noble appearance. And one was the enchanter Merlin, and the other was Sir Ulfius. And Merlin spake, saying, What cheer? And Sir Ector made answer, Here is cheer of a very wonderful sort. For behold, Merlin, this is that child that thou didst bring unto me 18 years ago. And lo, thou seest, he hath grown unto manhood. Then Merlin said, Sir Ector, I know very well who is this youth, for I have kept diligent watch over him for all this time. Within the surface of an enchanted looking-glass I have beheld all that he hath done today. And lo, the spirit of prophecy is upon me, and I do foresee that many knights of extraordinary excellence shall gather about thee, and I do foresee that the most marvelous adventure of the Holy Grail shall be achieved by 3 of the knights of thy court, and that to thy lasting renown. And lo, the time is now at hand when the glory of thy house shall again be made manifest unto the world, and all the people of this land shall rejoice in thee and thy kinghood. Wherefore, Sir Ector, for these 3 days to come, do thou guard this young man as the apple of thine eye, for in him doth lie the hope and salvation of this realm. All this while Sir Kay had stood like one struck by thunder, and he wist not whether to be uplifted unto the skies, or to be cast down into the depths, that his young brother should thus have been exalted unto that extraordinary altitude of fortune. But then Sir Ector cried unto Arthur, A boon, a boon. And Arthur said, Dost thou, my father, ask a boon of me when thou mayst have all in the world that is mine to give? Ask, and it is thine. Then Sir Ector said, I do beseech of thee this, that when thou art king, thy brother Kay may be seneschal of the realm. And Arthur said, It shall be as thou dost ask. As for thee, it shall still be better, for thou shalt be my father unto the end. Whereupon he took Sir Ector's head into his hands, and he kissed Sir Ector, and so sealed his plighted word. So when the morning of Christmas Day had come, many thousands of folk of all qualities, both gentle and simple, gathered in front of the church to behold the assay of that sword. Now there had been a canopy of embroidered cloth spread above the sword, and nigh unto that place there had been a throne for the archbishop established. For the archbishop was to overlook the assay and see that every circumstance was fulfilled with due equity. And after the archbishop had established himself upon his throne, he commanded his herald to sound a trumpet, and to bid all those who had the right to make assay of the sword to come unto that adventure. Now unto that assay there had gathered 19 kings and 16 dukes. And when the herald had sounded his trumpet, there immediately appeared the first of these kings, and he was King Lot of Orkney. King Lot mounted the platform, and first he saluted the archbishop, and then he laid his hands to the sword. And he drew upon the sword with great strength, but he could not move the blade in the anvil, even the breadth of a hair. And he tried 4 times more, but still he was altogether unable to move the blade. Then, filled with anger, he came down from that place. And after King Lot, there came his brother-in-law, King Urien of Gore, but neither did he succeed. And after King Urien there came King Fian of Scotland, and King Mark of Cornwall, and King Rience of North Wales. And then came 30 other kings and dukes, and not one of all these was able to move the blade. Now the people who were there were astonished, and they said to one another, If all those kings and dukes have failed to achieve that adventure, then who may hope to succeed? And likewise those kings and dukes spoke together in the same manner. And there came 6 of the most worthy, and these stood before the archbishop and spake in this wise, Sir, here have all the kings and dukes of this realm striven to draw forth that sword, and lo, not one hath succeeded. What then may we understand but that the enchanter Merlin hath set this adventure for to bring shame upon all of us and upon you, who are the head of the church? Then was the archbishop much troubled in spirit, but he spake aloud, Messieurs, I have yet faith that Merlin hath not deceived us. Wherefore I pray your patience for a little while longer. For if in this time a man may count 500 twice over, no one cometh forward to perform this task, then will I choose one from amongst you, and will proclaim him king and overlord of all. Now Merlin had bidden Arthur and his father and brother to abide in their pavilion until such time as he thought fit for them to come out. And now Merlin and Sir Ulfius went to the pavilion, and Merlin said, Arthur, arise and come forth, for the hour is come. So Arthur did as Merlin bade him, and he came forth from the pavilion with his father and his brother. And he was like one who walked in a dream, So they five went down toward the church, and unto that place of assay. And when they had come there, the people made way for them, saying to one another, Who are these with the enchanter Merlin and Sir Ulfius? For all the world knew Merlin and Sir Ulfius, and Arthur was clad all in flame-colored raiment, embroidered with silver, so that others of the people said, Certes, that youth is fair to look upon. Now who may he be? But Merlin said no word to any man, but he brought Arthur through the press unto that place where the archbishop sat. And Merlin said, Lord, here is one come to make assay of yonder sword. And he laid his hand upon Arthur. Then the archbishop looked upon Arthur, and he beheld that the youth was very comely of face, wherefore his heart went out unto Arthur. And the archbishop said, Merlin, by what right doth this young man come hither? And Merlin made reply, Lord, he cometh hither by the best right in the world, for he is the true son of Uther Pendragon, and of his lawful wife, Queen Igraine. Then the archbishop cried out aloud in amazement, and said, Merlin, what is this that thou tellest me? For who until now hath ever heard that Uther Pendragon had a son? Unto this Merlin made reply, Until now only a very few have known of such a thing. For it was in this wise. When this child was born, I foresaw that Uther Pendragon would die before a great while. Wherefore I feared that the enemies of the king would lay violent hands upon the young child. So, at the king's behest, I and another took the child, and gave him unto a third. And that man received the kingly child, and maintained him as his own son. And there are others here who may attest the truth of such things. For he who was with me when the young child was taken from his mother was Sir Ulfius, and he to whom he was entrusted was Sir Ector of Bonmaison. And these two witnesses are without any reproach. And Sir Ulfius and Sir Ector said, All that Merlin hath spoken is true. Then the archbishop looked upon Arthur, and smiled. And Arthur said, Have I then thy leave, Lord, to handle yonder sword? And the archbishop said, Thou hast my leave. Thereupon Arthur went to the marble stone, and he laid his hands upon the haft of the sword which was in the anvil. And he bent his body, and drew, and lo, the sword came forth with great ease. And he swung the sword about his head, so that it flashed like lightning. And after he had swung it thus thrice about his head, he set the point thereof against the face of the anvil, and bore upon it. And behold, the sword slid smoothly back into place. Now when the people beheld this miracle performed, they lifted up their voices all together in a tumult of outcry. And all the kings and dukes who were there were filled with amazement. But some of them were not willing to acknowledge Arthur. These withdrew, and they said among themselves, Who can accredit such a thing, that a beardless boy should be set above us all? Nay, we will have none of him. But others of the kings and dukes came and saluted Arthur, and paid him court, giving him joy of that which he had achieved. And all the multitude crowded around that place, shouting so that it sounded like to thunder. And when Arthur departed, great crowds followed after him, giving him loud acclaim as the chosen king of England. Wherefore his heart was uplifted with great gladness, so that his soul took wing and flew like a bird into the sky. Thus Arthur achieved the adventure of the sword, and entered into his birthright of royalty. Wherefore may God grant his grace unto you, that all ye too may likewise succeed in your undertakings. For any man may be a king in that life in which he is placed, if so if so be he may draw forth the sword of success from out of the iron of circumstance. Wherefore, when your time of stay cometh, I do hope it may be with you as it was with Arthur that day. Amen.